Yeah, what I'm going to talk about today is a big focus, I guess, on some work that Southern Farming Systems have been doing with the spring sown winter canola. So basically grazing canola over summer. And then just go through a bit of work that we've done looking at this sort of, rather than having a fallow, what can we get to grow over the summer and what people have been up to. So, yeah, I guess the push behind this work is SBS have done quite a lot of work with grain and graze and grazing cereals, but just seems to be quite hard to graze canola without a yield penalty. So autumn sowing canola, it's hard to get enough dry matter to warrant a grazing, and then getting a grain yield decrease from that as well. You know, I think a lot of growers have just said it's probably not worth the risk. So yeah, bring in the introduction of some of these winter canolas, as they're called. So just like the winter wheats that some of you might have heard about yesterday, they've got a vernalisation requirement. So they're not going to go reproductive until they get this cold snap in winter. So yeah, dictated by temperature rather than day length, like the spring types are. So I changed my presentation around a bit last night just because I got thinking about how, I guess, lucky we've been over the last 2 years to have two pretty contrasting seasons as far as summer forage crops go. So yeah, our first year we sowed some canola in 2011 in November, and that was Taurus, which is probably that sort of, I guess, trade name for these winter canolas at the start, but there's quite a few more varieties now. But yeah, sown on the 16th of November, grazed over summer and autumn, so treated as a forage brassica. We played around a bit with the grazing management, so we grazed it once, twice, 3 times, heavy and light. And we also played around with nitrogen after grazing just to see if a bit of N would help the recovery. Took the sheep out when we sowed our autumn sown canola next door. So basically, yeah, taking the sheep out and letting it go and be managed as a grain crop from then on. So yeah, I guess Dunkeld, just near Hamilton there, it was a pretty textbook summer conditions. So sown in November, we got rain, got quite a wet winter, but the trial canola came out looking pretty good. And that's it. On the 31st of January, we just put the sheep in. So there was 3.5 tonne of dry matter on offer, and that's been growing since the 16th of November. In 2012-13 season, we sowed a few of these newer varieties that have come on the market, some commercially available and some not yet. And yeah, I guess don't need to remind you guys of the conditions, I guess. It was a dry spring in 2012 anyway, and I kept pushing off the sowing because it was so dry. Ended up sowing mid-November, and 2 weeks later got about 40 mil of rain to get that crop up. And yeah, I guess this tells a good story. We got rain sort of end of November, start of December, and then nothing in January, like not enough even to settle the dust in Feb, March or April, until mid-May when we got the break. So yeah, I've just got a few pictures just to show what happened. So this is just as a contrast. So that 2012-13 canola, there was about a tonne less dry matter on offer there. But look, in last summer, 2.5 tonne of grain feed at that time of year in that season. How do you put a price on that? There was nothing green around at all. So we were pretty chuffed with how it looked, and I guess the weather started, it started really kicking into it. So we just put the sheep on, for them to do the damage instead of the weather, I guess. So as I said, it's a forage crop and a grain crop. So we got harvest off it. In 2012, so the first year that we did this trialling, we found that there was no significant difference between 1, 2 or 3 grazings or grazing heavy or light. So grain yield, it's neither here nor there, but the amount of dry matter that we got between, say, 2 light grazings and 3 heavy grazings, I think there was 1.5 tonne of dry matter difference there. So again, you know, looking at the economics of it, whether you want to push it and risk 300 or 400 kilos of grain for 1.5 tonne of dry matter over the summer. It's up to you. So that's just showing that. And we had some ungrazed and autumn sown stuff nearby, and actually grazing significantly increased yield compared to not grazing and sowing in the spring, which was interesting. So 4 tonne of dry matter, 60 days of grazing, high feed quality, and no yield penalty. So that was pretty exciting. 2012-13 season, just as a word of caution, these yields are a bit higher because we ended up hand harvesting it, just because the maturities were so different and we couldn't get the plot header in there into that plot without damaging everything else. So whilst they're high, I think, you know, they're still quite achievable. I mean, we just lost less grain technically out the back of the header because we were collecting it at windrowing. So I think, yeah, whilst treating with caution, they're still real numbers, and they allow us to make a comparison between varieties and grazed, ungrazed, and spring and autumn sown. So yeah, as you can see, dry matter was down that year, but because it didn't rain, that's what you'd expect. It was amazing that the plants even recovered from the first grazing with no rain. Like, I guess, yeah, it just really showed this ability for canola and, you know, this deep root system to access moisture that's down there that we can't see. The thing that was really interesting, and I guess in this season, there was a few growers around that had put spring canola in but weren't happy with their plant numbers come the autumn, so after they grazed it. So we did a bit of counting of plants and found that whether you grazed it or ungrazed it, you know, there was no significant change or difference in the number of plants you had. So I think it was the season that caused this plant loss, and you can see this percent loss in plants there. Our autumn sown stuff, as you can see, like 8 plants, 14 plants per metre squared, really poor establishment, and that was because we sowed it in April. It was dry. It just wasn't good seed bed conditions. So again, I'm taking the autumn sown results with a bit of grain of salt, but yeah. So yeah, we basically found there's no difference in yield or dry matter between the varieties. No difference in yield when sown in spring, if it's grazed or ungrazed, except for Taurus, which was a bit of a dodgy seed source. I think it had a germination of 50% or something, so it was pretty terrible. Yeah, we actually had Winfred rape in there as well, and in that 2012-13 year, there was no difference in dry matter produced, and I think it's because it was quite limited by the weather. As I said, plant numbers declined in grazed and ungrazed, but still adequate plant numbers to take the crop through to grain, so around 30 plants per metre squared. High feed quality, and I've just got a few prices up there just to compare, say, a price of a forage rate, which I guess technically this might replace in a rotation. You know, get 2 crops essentially out of one sowing pass, but you're paying for it in the seed. It's just a photo of the grazing pressure that we put on it. So both years, every grazing got grazed down to the floorboards. And, you know, it's not something that I intended to do every time, but sheep have this knack of not eating something for weeks and then they just eat it overnight. So there was a few heart attacks happening, a couple of visits to the sheep, but yeah, we really flogged it. Yeah, just on that, I guess, grazing pressure thing, this is just a photo that was taken 2 days ago at our Westmere trial. And I guess just comparing, so these are two commercially available forage rates, and this is the grazing canola trial, and thought, oh, you know, shouldn't they be almost preferentially grazing the rape over the canola? And I asked Tim Brown the other day, and it's a pretty, I guess, easy explanation with these glucosinolates in the rapes, and it's been bred out in the canolas, but it's basically this requirement for ripening before grazing in these rapes. So they taste a bit bitter until they're ripe to go, and those canolas don't have that. So I think we'd probably find if it was a paddock of rape, you know, they wouldn't have the choice, but and actually sown a little bit early because of the pest pressure that we had there. Sorry, grazed a bit early because we just had diamondback moth all through it, and they were munching on it before the sheep got to it. So yeah, just I guess an interesting picture. This is 2013, so the start of last year, after 3 heavy grazings, and it hadn't rained then, so the fact that there's green stuff there is pretty amazing. But I actually had the farmer ring me after he drove past this paddock around about this time, and he said, you know, I've got 70 hectares of this stuff in around the corner, I'm spraying it out, like, not that I don't believe in it, but I can't, like, the way that it looks today, I'm not happy with taking it through. And I said, that's absolutely fine. I'm, you know, haven't gone and visited that paddock for 6 weeks because I don't expect anything to be there, and I was a bit down. But yeah, after the break, the farmer rang me again and he said, have you been past that paddock lately, like that trial area? Because there's plants there, they've grown back, it looks like, you know, you've just sown it in the autumn. So, you know, to come and find these plots recovered the way that they have in this photo is pretty cool. So it's just a comparison of 3 treatments, so spring sown ungrazed, spring sown grazed, and autumn sown. And like, you know, when you're thinking about slug pressure in June, July, and having a crop that looks like that compared to something that looks like that, I mean, that's where I think this has a real place, is just its resilience towards, you know, pests at that key time of year. Weeds, it's a good photo just with like weeds in the furrow where there was no crop, and then in the plot it was just completely bare. And I think that, you know, rapid shading out of the plot after grazing helps. It's changing canopy, so that's a conventional sown ungrazed stem, and that's spring sown and grazed heavily 3 times, just with that, I guess, tillers that it produces under stress, and basically the removal of that main stem. Just delay in flowering from grazing, try and run through this, and just a phenology comparison. So this was on the same day, spring sown ungrazed, spring sown grazed, and autumn sown. And they look like pretty handy canola plots in their own right, I think, and the fact that they were completely flogged out over the summer is pretty cool. The question, I guess, is like, where does this fit in my rotation? Like spring sowing, you know, you need to have a paddock open for sowing in spring. And at Westmere last year, I put in a pea crop and a rye corn crop, so sown sort of in June and July, and green manured the peas in, and we grazed the rye corn, and went in November with spring canola. So just seeing, like, you don't have to have a fallow for this to work. There's potentially these short-term crops or rotations that can set up well, and this was just a comparison, like that cost of the green manuring the peas, but the N that it fixes and that sort of thing, and we'll just be able to compare the performance of the 2 rotations. Some other stuff that we're doing in our area, looking at, there's a grower down our way that actually sows beans. He's done it for a couple of years now. Broadcast beans and then offset discs them in in November, and then this was sprayed out just after Christmas with Roundup and brown manuring these beans to set up for a crop. So that was a pasture coming into the cropping rotation that he just bunged some beans in pretty cheaply, and gets this end source as well. So thought that was it raises a few eyebrows around the place when people drive past. This one I just added in because I visited the trial the other day and couldn't believe that it actually worked. But the theory behind this is we sowed forage sorghum in spring 2012, grazed it pretty heavily with sheep, put a cereal over the top, and it's just laid dormant all year, and after harvest now it's coming up through the stubble. So there's just a green feed source, I guess, when you're grazing your stubble. And I mean, we were just testing the theory, and now we'll probably look into it a bit more deeply. But I think that's pretty cool. That's a plot that was basically fallow all year, and I just reckon the sorghum started growing back a bit quicker because there was nothing competing. I'll go through, it's just more beans and a bit of pasture that we put in. I just want to get to one thing. So in November last year I went a bit mad and actually sowed some winter wheat in spring just to see if it would act the same as the canola, and unfortunately I went 2 weeks ago and it was pretty dead. But after seeing BCG's photos yesterday, who knows, there's still a few green plants hanging on. And anyway, it's answered the question of a few growers over the last few months saying, are the winter wheats going to act the same as the winter canolas? And they just don't seem to have that strength to the heat. And just also with this spring canola, trying some companion planting with beans and soybeans in the furrow together. So we'll see. Thank you very much.